story about Mark Martin giving you retirement advice.
Well, I think as I've gone through the years of trying to figure out when the right time was to step away from the car, I've tried to seek out different people throughout the years, and Mark Martin was always one that I thought would be fun to talk to because he retired, then unretired, and then retired, and then unretired. And I was just always curious, and I would really pick everybody's brain, but I think Mark made it pretty clear that the thing that he missed the most was seeing his number on top of the scoreboard in the infield, and those are quotes from him. And really the biggest thing that I took away from not only Mark, but all the different people that I've talked to that have been professional athletes and tried to decide on their own terms when the right time was to step away, was it'll just happen. And it'll just happen, and you'll realize that that's the right moment, and you'll make a plan, and you'll decide that that's the last year. So Mark really missed the competitive nature of the sport, and I look at him now, and he's so happy not in the competitive nature of the sport. But I think between Mark Martin, I think Joe Girardi was also somebody that I leaned on to try to decide when that right moment was, and they were right. It just all made sense, and you can continue doing what you wanted to do and being around the sport, but also get out of that competitive mindset. And that to me is the part that is the hardest part to get out of, is seeing your number on that scoreboard and trying to say, okay, I want it to be on top of the scoreboard, or winning a race, or whatever that moment is. Those are the moments that keep you coming back. So if you're still doing that like we have been, it's hard to say, okay, I need to stop now because I'm not as competitive as I want to be. So it has definitely been hard to understand when that right moment is, because we've been so fortunate to run well. But sometimes there's just other things going on that become more important.
You've talked about still loving to compete and still having that fire in you. So why now?
Well, I think as I go through everything that I have going on in life, and Keelan is much better at the racetrack, and it takes a lot of time to organize the level of racing that he is doing, and to be around that is important to me. I've only in the last year probably seen him race. I think I've seen him race 3 times throughout the year while he's been in Europe. I go to the go-kart track with Piper, and she makes twice as many strides in a day while I'm there than she would on a day when nobody's there. So, the kids just, for me, are very interesting to be around, and I have that those moments where you can learn so much together, and I realize, and I've always said that the day that I realize that it's taken away from them will be the end of what I do, and I really enjoy being around racing, and they're both interested in racing. I'm still going to be around the sport, and I have this interest in trying to help them achieve their goals. Obviously, Keelan is closer to that time period than Piper is currently, but it's youth sports is such a different area to navigate in today's world, and everything is so specialized in what they do, and traveling around the world and racing is different than going to your local go-kart club and trying to manage it. So it's important for me to be a part of that, and it really fits right into what we do as from a business standpoint at KHI Management, and the things that we've done in the past, and being able to try to navigate his early career is, even though he's 10, seems silly, but it's still very meaningful, the decisions that we make.
You hit on this a little bit, but can you talk about how racing will always be part of your life?
So I grew up on the West Coast. My dad was a fireman, mom was a secretary, and now I've raced for, I guess, I'm 47. I started when I was 5, so raced for my whole life pretty much. And as I look at that, and you look at a lot of the legacy families in our sport, I don't think the Harvick legacy is anything like the Petty legacy or the Earnhardt legacy, but racing is very much a family sport. And when you grow up in the sport and you're around the sport, 9 times out of 10, you're going to love the sport and you're going to want to be around it as you grow into an adult and through your childhood years. You wind up with so many great memories at the racetrack, around racing people, and it just becomes a lifestyle. And I think for us, I grew up racing, obviously my whole life. My wife grew up around racing her whole life with her father racing. She was on the PR side of the world, working in the racing world. So we are a racing family, and that's what we like to do. And I used to try to find other things to do, whether it was play golf or go do this, but there is absolutely nothing in the world that I enjoy more than doing than going to the racetrack. And I think for me, as I've gone through the last few years with Keelan, you start to realize how much you really enjoy racing, because I stand around and I watch go-karts go around the racetrack, or I'll go to a late model racetrack and just watch cars go around the racetrack, whether it's my kids on the racetrack or not. I enjoy watching racing and being a part of racing and talking to people about racing, and that's just who we are as a family.
Okay, so what's your mentality heading into your last Cup season?
My mentality heading into the last Cup season is to try to do the exact same things we've done for the last 22 years, and that's be competitive, make sure that every week that you show up to the racetrack that you're doing all that you can do for your teammates on your team. The guys, I know my guys on the 4 car show up every week 100%, and if you're not 100%, you're letting the rest of that team down, because they're locked, loaded, and ready with the details that it takes to be competitive. And if we're not competitive, we have the access to a group of people that can communicate and do the things that it takes to figure it out. And I want to do what we have to do to try to get back to victory lane and be competitive and work with a group of guys that really has kept me racing, because of the fact that I love going to the racetrack with the guys that I have on our car. And everybody at Stewart-Haas has been so great from the very beginning to let us go out and hire Rodney and let Rodney build a group of guys around the 4 car, and I think the success speaks for itself. So it's going to be a fun year of a lot of stories and things that we've done, and remember when we came here for the first time, and we can laugh and pat each other on the back and tell each other how much we enjoyed the beginning days all the way through the end. So, but I think as you look at that, everybody knows that they're going to show up and do the same things that we've done and be prepared just like we would be, because that's our job.
Is there anything left to check off the racing list?
I don't know that I could necessarily pick one thing to check off the racing list. I think the most important thing to check off that list now is to make sure the last year goes correct. And I think as everybody who's been around me knows, that I want to make sure that I'm involved in everything and make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's, because it's kind of like going into your first year and winning your first race and running your first race, and you can only run your last season once, and I want to make sure it's right for as many people as possible, because I've had so many people that have helped me get to that point, and you can't do any of this without people, and without the right people and the right people believing in you, and it's hard to have success. So I've been fortunate to be on the good side of that.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I'm not sure what I want. I mean, it's hard to talk about your own legacy. I think for me, over the last couple years, I think I've really realized how important it is to be the kind of the elder statesman and kind of take that leadership role with the younger guys. I don't know that I necessarily did a good job of that in the years before that, because I don't really feel like, it was a little bit weird with COVID and not really being a part of around the guys that you race against and being in the garage with all the people. But over the last couple of years, it's been a lot of fun to be able to learn and see about a lot of the younger guys in the sport, understand how young they are and how little they actually do know, and realize and think back to maybe how naive you were in the beginning of your career to not really know and not really understand how things work. And we have a great group of young racers, and you know, I think for me, probably the most important thing is when you walk out of that racetrack on the last weekend, you know, leaving a good thought in the mind of all those guys on how to do it right when you're done, and you know, hopefully how to treat people right, and leave a good legacy that everybody else can determine, but your competitors respect.
What advice would you give to the younger guys?
Well, you know, I think as you look at I'm just going to relate it. I'm not going to relate it to. I don't want to relate anything to the younger guys. I'm going to relate it to my career. When I started, if I could have just listened to a few more people, I've always been pretty ambitious and always been pretty pushy on how I like things, and you know, I think a lot of them could do that. I think a lot of them could be a little more ambitious in trying to push things a little bit further to make things better, and not just accept the way that things are, or accept that, you know, I'm just happy to have a job. I was never happy to just have a job. I wanted to be a part of how do we get better? How do we find something better? How do we push harder? And I think a lot of them could push harder in their situations and step out on that limb. Even if you are worried about that job, it's great to have a paycheck, but it's way more fun if you win. And the only way to do that is to sometimes step out on that limb and stick up for what you think is right. But we have a lot of great guys, but I would just sometimes just step back and listen.
What will you miss the most?
The thing that I'll miss the most is walking into the garage every week and you know, seeing the guys that you've dealt with on a week-to-week basis, and being able to fix something with a group of people that you're kind of at war with. And that's how I've always looked at it, is it's kind of a war. And you're in that war with a group of people, and you're trying to figure out how to survive. And because it really is a game of survival, and how do you figure out what you're gonna do next in order to gain an advantage, make up ground to keep up. And I think our group does that really well. And I think that, you know, as we've had less practice with the new car, you know, that probably takes a little bit of our advantage away, because we're really good at figuring out how to make our car work, because we communicate really well. And that's the part I'll miss the most, is the communication and the conversations that come with, all right, the car did this, and looking at somebody and saying, no, it didn't, it did this, and them saying, okay. And then you move on, and then you say something, and then they say, well, no, that actually happened here, and you'd be like, okay, yeah, right. And those are just great conversations, because with the group of guys that we have, nobody ever gets mad. It's always a productive conversation to solve a problem, make things better, and we're all in it together. And it's hard to find a group of people that communicate well together consistently to be able to be successful. And it's never anybody poking their chest out and saying, I'm the reason that we run fast, or I'm the reason that we won, or I'm the reason that we did this. It's always, man, good job, good job, good job, and it's just kind of what we do. And you know, I think it would be hard to find a group of people like that again.
So obviously your story's been told a lot in the media. What is something that fans might not know about Kevin Harvick the person?
Oh, Kevin Harvick the person. Yeah, I'm probably not as I'm probably not as tough as most people would probably think that you are. I'm very stubborn. I'm a pretty emotional person. Like I get pretty emotional. But I've always just put up such a front of, this is who I am, and this is how I want to do it. And I think behind closed doors, people that have worked with me know that I'm pretty workable, you know, as far as, you know, I think we should try this, or I think we should do that. Let's go over here. I'm pretty flexible in trying to make things better. I'm pretty open to ideas. I'm not as old school, I guess, as a lot of people would perceive me to be, that I'm, you know, we're going to do it this way, and I'm going to be a hard ass, and I'm always going to, you know, be a jerk. Like, I'm only a jerk on the camera for the most part, but I can be pretty straightforward and to the point away from the camera as well. But I think the way that I'm perceived inside the walls of the racetrack is probably much different than what a lot of people would tell you that it's like outside when the cameras are off.
Why do you feel like you put up that front?
I just never want anybody to really know who I am. And I think that for me, I've never wanted anybody to know when I'm hurt. I don't want anybody to know when I'm sick. I don't want anybody to know how we got here. I don't want anybody to know how we organize things, because I always feel like our way's better. And I'm always open, but I always want you to think that our way is the best. And man, it's like, how do they manage all that? Or how do they do that year after year? And, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And you know, I think those are the things that you just never want your competitors to know. And you just never want to open up and say, you know, this is how we do this. I hear so many people talk, and we talk very little outside of our walls and our group of people, because I figure the less insight that people can have about you, the better off you're going to be.